the Feast of the Holy Family. Just a few days ago, we celebrated Christmas Day, and now we are in the octave of Christmas. We celebrate that solemnity for 8 days, and then for several weeks, we are in the Christmas season. We've arrived at the Feast of the Holy Family, and we are, in a sense, confronted with the Holy Family, and the church tells us that we need to be like the Holy Family, and every year I scratch my head when I think of my family and the Holy Family. This was the first Mass that I attended back in 1993 after being away from the church for 15 years, and it was right here at St. Timothy that I came at the invitation of my sister, and I've been going to Mass ever since. It was the invitation of a family member, and then we invited my brother, and all three of us have been going to church ever since. After all of us, every one of us in the family, all the kids fell away from the church. And I hope, that somehow, I hear a lot about family members falling away from the church. It's still going on in my family, that in some capacity, in some way, that your child, your grandchild, if they have been away from the church, will eventually find their way back. Maybe they will be confronted with what I was, emptiness, a feeling of I'm not fulfilling my purpose. This isn't what, life was supposed to be like after I got out there in the world, and they said you need to do this, this, and this to be happy, and you're like, well, there's something big that's missing, and it was this: church, faith, religion, Catholicism. The Holy Family versus my family. And in many regards, say, well, there's no comparison. My family's got problems. My family's got problems. I was fortunate enough after Masses on Christmas, I thought, well, how can I see my family, because I haven't seen them in a long time because of COVID. How can I go and see my family and still be somewhat safe? Right? Because we heard, I didn't go home for Thanksgiving, I didn't visit for Thanksgiving, but we heard that there was another spike after Thanksgiving. It wasn't the result of people getting together, I don't know. I assume that maybe it is. So I decided, it's like, well, I don't like to give gifts anymore that you stack on the shelf and it just fills up your garage and you don't know what to do with it. So I like to give perishable gifts, so I was out in the kitchen and out in the backyard with the barbecues going, making homemade jerky from three different kinds, 2 different kinds of deer and one wild hog. And they came out pretty good, and I put them in vacuum sealed bags, and I figured, okay, on Christmas I'll stop by the different houses of my family and deliver these. And I thought it was going to be quick. And it wasn't, and delightfully so it wasn't. When I, arrived at my brother's house and my sister-in-law saw me, they're like, oh, come in, you got to visit. And you're like going, wow, this is kind of nice, because I don't know about you, I'm not very perfect in my family. Sometimes people don't want to drag me in the house and visit. They want to say, hey, when are you leaving? When are you leaving? And we had a very nice visit. And then I went to my sister's house, and I hadn't been over there in quite a while. And same thing. Hey, I just want to drop this off and say Merry Christmas. Oh, come in. We tried to social distance as best we could, and another visit that probably lasted an hour. And then her daughter with her kids are living there, and she said, oh, I'm going to text my sister and tell her that you're on the way. So I went over to their house, and standing in the living room visiting with them, and they got this adorable little boy and a little girl on the way. And by the time I look at my watch, it's like 10 o'clock. And I still had one more visit, and my other sister, and she's just down the street from them, but by the time I got over there, their house was dark, so I just left their gift bag outside and sent a text. But it was really amazing. They want to bring me in their house, and I know, we hear that Jesus from Simeon will be a sign to be contradicted. And when you're a priest in a family in this day and age, you're assigned to be contradicted. And when you stand for what's right, whether they watch the YouTube video that's posted, or you speak something within the family context, you can be contradicted because many of them are unchurched. And so we have problems in the family. And I think about the Holy Family. It's like, well, how do we connect? In my family, earliest memories are alcoholism. And you look back in the family history, and throughout the family history, we've had children that were fathered outside of wedlock. We've got cohabitation. We have depression. There's even suicide. There's alcoholism to the point of people dropping dead from it. There's same-gender relations. The list just goes on and on and on. People getting in trouble with the law. People driving drunk. People getting in car accidents and dying. It's a long list. But then I was reminded, I believe by a priest. I was reading the accounts of a priest, I believe in England, and he was saying, they had problems too. They weren't sinful, but they had problems. So Joseph is betrothed to Mary, and she's found to be with child. That's a big scandal back in those days. Big scandal. And he was going to divorce her quietly and probably find a way to move her to another town so she wouldn't be killed, because that was the result of the law of Moses. If you were found like this outside of marriage, you were to be taken to the edge of town and stoned to death. And this happens. And then Joseph receives this message from the angel that says, do not be afraid. And so they prepare for their marriage, and then it happens, and then he gets this summons. You got to come to Bethlehem where you were born, because the Roman emperor is doing his census. And so he has to take his very pregnant wife. And if you've traveled that distance from Galilee, from Nazareth down to Bethlehem, that's a very, very arid, dry, barren place. And he takes her there. She's very pregnant, about to give birth, and they got problems. There's no place for them because everybody's come back for the census. All the inns are full, so there's no room for them. They're essentially homeless. That's a big problem. And they were able to stay in a stable, really a cave, with farm animals. And she gives birth to this baby in a feed box, a manger. They're poor. And then they go to the temple for the dedication of Jesus after the purification ritual. Believe it or not, according to Jewish law, Mary, ever virgin, most pure, is considered ritually unclean until a certain amount of days pass after she gives birth to the baby. So after that, they go to the temple, and they're so poor, all they can offer in sacrifice is 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons. Shortly thereafter, they get this message from an angel, take the child and flee. Because, can you imagine? Your wife just gives birth to a little baby, because Herod wants to kill him. Oh my goodness, I couldn't imagine the fear. And he takes his wife and the child, and they travel to Egypt on foot. One of the things that Mother Angelica said about Joseph, is often depicted as an old man, probably because they want to preserve the image of the perpetual virginity of Mary, rightfully so. But she said, old men do not walk to Egypt. And Joseph and Mary took that baby and went to Egypt and went into obscurity. Can you imagine? Were they able to communicate? How were they able to operate all those hidden years in Egypt? And then eventually he's told to come back. And then when Jesus turns 12, they were used to going to the temple for the Passover, and they're coming back. And again, the temple isn't all that far from Bethlehem, and they're coming back to Galilee, again, that very barren desert between the two, and they notice that Jesus isn't around. Can you imagine? This is a big problem. Can you imagine the fear? You lost your kid, and he's the Son of God. And they're going about and say, we've been looking for you anxiously for 3 days. Can you imagine? They couldn't sleep. They're like, where is he? And they find him in the temple. And he says something so enigmatic. Why didn't you know that I would be here doing my Father's business in this house of his presence? And Mary's just like, instead of, hey kid, you're getting a spanking, she's like, hey, there's something special here that I need to ponder in my heart. They had problems, we have problems. They lived in obedience to God. They fulfilled, it says in the reading today, the prescripts of the law of God, meaning they were obedient to what God wanted for them. And that's the goal of our lives. You know, when I think about my family and my own lack of influence over them and coming to grips with that, it's like, you know, I have a friend, I'm accountable to him. He's actually a Protestant, and he's kind of a spiritual director, a wonderful friend. You know, I bring a lot of things to him about family stuff. He's a Christian, and he knows what it's like to live in a family, a very imperfect family. And he says, you know, you can say this, but you only need to say it once. Do they know what you think about this? Yes, you don't need to keep repeating yourself. And then another family member says, say what you mean, but don't say it mean. It means that I don't have to be silent when I see stuff going on in the family that is contrary to the will of God. But I don't need to keep repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. It's like I put it out there, and now I can step back and say, hey, you know where I am? And if they need to check in, you say, well, do you remember what I said about this? Yes, okay. It's imperfect. We have problems. I want my family to be holy, but I have a lack of influence in many regards over that. And I think that if I try to show a good example, maybe that will speak more than anything I could say. And maybe you're in the same situation. See, we need to be obedient to God as the Holy Family was, to fulfill the prescripts of the law of God, meaning obedience. And then it says that the child found favor, that the family found favor with God. May we too, by our following of Christ in the context of the family, find favor with God.